It's Friday night. It's still number one. It's the Darius and OMONDI Untitled podcast. Here we go. All right, hello everyone. It's actually Thursday night, and I can't think of an intro, so I used the Top of the Pops late 2000s one. OMONDI, how are you, sir?
Yeah, good man. I remember, look, when there was only 4 or 5 channels, Top of the Pops, we always knew 7:30 on a Thursday, Top of the Pops would be on, and it was, I don't know how many millions they used to get watching that show, but it was like the 80s, early 90s. It was the best show out there, man. I mean, you'd be checking out the charts and seeing some live performances. I remember my dad actually appeared on Top of the Pops. He was in the audience.
Wow.
It's 1981. Yeah, he had a record, got to number 4 in the charts, and he was in the audience, but we could only see the back of him. But they show it on UK Gold. They have the same video, so sometimes I go back and check and see his little afro and do a little dance, you know.
Like Jarzinho. Amazing.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did look a bit like Jarzinho. Yeah,
because I loved. Well, I used to love Top of the Pops because on Friday night it used to be Crime Watch and then Top of the Pops, and it was my favourite hour of television throughout the week. I could spot my dad on not on Top of the Pops, but on Crime Watch.
I want to say my dad made an appearance on Top of the Pops. I made an appearance once on Crime Watch.
That was the story. Yeah.
All right, I'll make it really quick. But basically, I was living with my dad, funny enough, at the time, and I must be like 17, 18. I was really into sort of music. I always wanted to be a DJ or sound engineer, and because I got loads of records. I've been buying records for years. And I was in a sound shop, like a sound equipment shop, and someone came in. So imagine me and my friend standing around and just look, techniques. Oh my God, look at all this equipment. And some guys came in that I wasn't even aware of. And they were snooping around. And it turns out they've done something, maybe purchased something, and robbed the shop. I don't know exactly. I can't remember exactly. So then I'm going out one night, trying Crime Watch is on. My dad's watching it. And he said, "Son, come in." And it was me on the CCTV. They associated me with these guys who were in the shop. Mind you, I'm 17, 18, these big grown men. And said that they're looking for me, framed me, this guy. And because they'd done some theft in this shop, and I'm like, "Oh my God, that's me!" But I didn't hit me. Wait, they're after me. So and I was going out at the time. So as soon as I got to the club, everyone watched because like you said, everyone used to watch Crime Watch back then. It was, "Oh my God, I just saw your Crime Watch," So I had to go to the police station and clear my name. Because that's my one claim to fame.
Oh, Rich, have any of your family
That was a
been
good story.
on
I was
Top of the
thinking, I was
Pops?
wondering where it's going then, but yeah, you're actually accused of it on Crime Watch. I was going to say, weirdly, this is a strange link. For some reason, I had the song, Top of the Pops 2, when it used to be on and basically just show old Top of the Pops. And I had the song from like that in my head for some reason, the Led Zeppelin song, Whole Lot of Love. And for some reason, I was thinking of the song Ramble On because it had lyrics for Lord of the Rings. And I was wondering if you actually liked that song. I was thinking today that whether someone would actually be a fan of that. It mentions Mordor, and I'm thinking.
Never heard of it. Like I have a very sort of I'm not great with music, to be honest. It's everything mainstream or bossa nova is pretty much all that I listen to. But speaking of Lord of the Rings, it's probably coming up to 6 months now. Monday, we'll just every show we'll just ask you, have you watched any of Lord of the Rings?
For those who don't know out there, I promised half time I would watch Lord of the Rings, and to this day, I said within the year, and we're about 6 months in now.
Did you?
We signed that agreement. It's a verbal agreement. I would do it. But funny enough, just to add, I've got my TV fixed up. I've got a new Fire Stick remote, which is means it doesn't chop or jump anymore, and it also means I can watch all movies through. Because before I was watching movies and it wasn't going all the way through, so I can now officially log in and watch it for free, and there's no argument now. So tune in next week, guys, and find out if I've watched Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. And just before we get into the show, even though I'd much prefer to talk about Monday's mistaken identity, I don't know if the show went out last week or not because I think Solo put it as members only. None of us are members here, so we haven't read any comments or seen like anything about it. So I'm really sorry about that. We'll try and get that sorted out in the next couple of weeks.
Isn't it, Rich? It's a must see. Last week's show, I think that was great.
Definitely. I think it's nice to get feedback, isn't it? It'd be nice to, even if it's negative, to be interested to see what people think.
Yeah.
Any feedback is useful, I think.
And don't worry, we're working on guests. As we said last week, can't see the comments, but if anyone wants to come on, has social skills, a microphone, and something they want to say, get in touch with well, not with me, not with them with Solo or Rebel. Yeah, get in touch with our secretary, and he'll sort you out. But today, I want to talk about something, and as always, we can go anywhere we want to, but. Lads, do you know what the 3 most popular sports in the world are? Right, I'll give you number 1. We all know it's footy.
Yeah, I was going to say football is there. Most in the world.
All right, Rich, can we just confirm, me and Richard?
Yeah?
Yeah. Rich, I don't think it's one of the American sports because it's like they have a World Series of baseball, but it's only in America, I don't think it's worldwide like that. So I don't know how
I was thinking cricket might be up there based on the countries that play it having crazy populations, but I guess what's popular in China?
Well, India is massive, and Pakistan.
That was why I thought cricket.
Yeah,
cricket is one of them.
Oh, brilliant! And I would say
you won't get the next one.
When you say popular, is in participation or?
Oh, okay, yeah. No, it is by participation. There's sport that is more popular than football for participation.
I was going to say track and field. Maybe?
Does fishing count as a sport?
It is, Rich. It's fishing. I'm very impressed. Fishing is the most popular sport in the world by participation.
Rich. Are you typing in Google?
No, I was thinking because it's one thing that is pretty much. I think I read something a long time ago in terms of most dangerous sports, and you think, okay, rugby is like you think of contact sports. And I think the most dangerous sports, I think it was like horse riding or fishing. Because of most like drowning or falling off, like that sort of injury. So I don't know. I just thought it was like a obscure thing that might have like a. I don't go fishing or I've been fishing, but I think it might be worldwide, just pretty popular.
But hold on, isn't fishing like? Is it a sport? Is it something people do? Because I've been to countries where it's not sport. It's a living. To get your food and to sell in the market or something. That's not sport.
Well, I don't know what the definition of it is, but it's a pastime, isn't it? It's like something like darts. Or, the most stupid one is weightlifting. I know you used to do it, OMONDI, but it's essentially picking a heavy object up and down. Like, I don't understand how that can be a sport, but it is. Darts, at least it has sort of like some military use or something. You can throw very small javelins at people. But if you're storming a castle and then you see a big guy and you just pick something up and then just drops it straight away, lads, we better get on to the next one. But I don't know. For those of you who don't know, OMONDI, were you a weightlifter or a bodybuilder, or are they the same thing?
I used to. I wouldn't. No. Well, both. Both. Yeah. I used to go to the gym a lot. So then it got to the stage where I got so sort of big and strong that I was sort of being competitive in the gym. And doing weights and with other guys trying to compete every week. We're going to go up. We're going to do this session. So it was always competition in the gym. And then it got to the point where I was starting to, I was quite comfortable to be able to pose a bit. I had a few muscles.
Hulking out.
I've got a question for you, OMONDI. Like, if you're like bulking up, did this have a detrimental effect on football in terms of like when some rugby players, for example, they bulk up so much that they lose a bit of speed, lose a bit of agility?
No, not for me, because I've always been. I was when I was younger before I got fat, but I used to be quite lean. I was always lean, so I was quite athletic. So I wasn't bulky like.
Okay, so not like weighty, but just like maybe.
No, I can still run. I can still move around a bit, but I do understand what you mean. Yeah, I see a lot of guys that put on. I've never taken any drugs or anything like that. So all the guys I was training used to take creatine and all these PEDs and that. And they used to get big and strong, but I'd never done anything. I used to just eat well and train. So I was always slimish, but cut in a way. So So it didn't affect me like that, but it does certainly, most certainly does.
I'm terrified of putting muscle on. Like, I'm so slow and I'm all like arse and legs as it is. Like, I don't want to put like any weight on at all on my upper body. I look absolutely ridiculous in real life. Like, but I don't want any weight on because I'm scared of being slow. But anyway, unless Richard, you're about to reveal that you're an Olympic bodybuilder or something.
No, I don't think I have anything to say on that.
No, well,
Sorry, can we just discuss the cricket one? Is that confirmed? Cricket is like one of
cricket is is in the top three. I mean, to be honest, I think I might have got this out of a BuzzFeed article when I checked it today. So I don't know how I don't know how accurate it is, but there are more cricket fans than there are Americans. Was basically what it said, and you got to think
that makes sense because
population of India.
Love it. I mean, the IPL right now is massive, isn't it, in India? So they love their cricket out there, and the population is huge.
And it's good. I mean, I'm not really massively into cricket. I'm not really into any other sports apart from boxing and football, to be honest. But like, extremely popular sport, and I'm glad that people enjoy it. And like, if you are from sort of Manchester or that sort of area, you know, like Lancashire, Yorkshire, and things, huge cricket matches, as well as big battles in the War of the Roses.
Yeah.
But the reason I brought up cricket, right, is because I began thinking about the Super League again today. And don't worry, we're not going to talk about Super Leagues or takeovers. But I remember Florentin Perez, who was like the figurehead of the Super League, he started talking about legacy fans and how football had to change, had to evolve. Maybe 30-minute halves. People were like, the young ones weren't as interested in football anymore. And I remember when I heard him say that, I thought about cricket. And you're right about the IPL, about all the ways that cricket is evolving into something that isn't Test cricket, and like your grandfathers probably wouldn't recognise as cricket. And it made me a bit sad because I began to think, is this going to happen to football? And then, like a light in the sky, I remembered a Brazilian man in an airport. And I want to talk about the greatest period of football the world has ever seen. And that's from 1998 to 2002. And that man in the airport was Ronaldo in that incredible Nike advert. I don't want to think about the future. I want to dwell in the past. So, gentlemen, will you dwell with me?
Yes! I like this subject. Is that the subject? Oh,
yeah.
No. Oh, beautiful.
Well, it's more about that period of time, because we're not like wildly different in age, but I think that Omondi's a bit older than Rich, and Rich is a little bit older than me, so we're all children at different times. But I want to talk about like the most exciting periods in football, and I think 1998 to 2002 is the best period of football ever. And I'd like to know your thoughts on that, because, all right, whilst you're thinking, I'll tell you why. First of all, we have that Nike advert, which I think starts it. Where, for those of you who haven't seen it, stop what you're doing, turn this off, go and Google 1998 Nike Airport. It's the greatest advert ever. It's got Eric Cantona in it. It's got someone called Denilson, who is a sort of folk hero.
He was just like step over crazy, wasn't he? He was like extremely popular for about 3 months, I think. I think he had like a massive peak. He sold for a crazy fee, didn't he, as well? Was he
world record? Yes.
Record, amazing fee, amazing player, but then kind of moved on quickly, like Ronaldinho as well. Other players emerging later. But
the end of that period, Rich, 2002, I might be wrong on this, but I think that Denilson scored the last goal in the World Cup final for Brazil to beat Germany.
No, Ronaldo scored both goals.
Ronaldo scored one, didn't he? I can't remember.
He scored both. He's got a brace.
But wasn't it 3-1?
No, it's 2-0.
2-0, wasn't it?
Was it 2-0? Well, anyway, I remember, like, Denilson, one of my favourite moments in football was during that World Cup, and it was against Turkey. And 6 men chased Denilson around the pitch. You can go and
I
look
think
it
you
up on
sent me that
YouTube.
clip, or I've seen that clip.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. It's like Amonde doesn't watch Game of Thrones, but where Jon Snow stands against the armies of whoever with his sword out, and they're all charging at him. Danielson did the same thing with the football, but we don't just have that Brazil team, right? We have Michael Owen scoring that goal. We have the United treble team. We have the France team, and then we have R9's redemption in the final in was it South Korea, I think.
Yeah.
And think of all the play like Euro 2000 is often said to be the greatest concentration of talent that football has ever seen, where you've got like Rui Costa and Figo, and it's crazy to think, right, that in 1998 Croatia were finishing third in a World Cup, and everyone thought that was amazing. And 22 years later, they're doing it again consecutively. But now you've had a bit of thinking time, Rich. The greatest period of football.
I think for me, obviously being a Manchester United fan, the 90s a massively was it massively exciting. I think I always said that the 99 season for me was probably the most exciting because of our what's the best way of putting it? You know how you like to control games, and we just had like throw caution to the wind. We won games like 5-3. I think we went to Leicester and won like 6-2 or something. There was like crazy games, high scoring, exciting football, and the Champions League games as well, ridiculous games, 3-3s against Barcelona. So for me, that was my favourite season, and probably the most exciting, stressful at the time because we had to keep coming back from 1-0 down in injury time, like in the FA Cup against Liverpool, last minute penalty against Bergkamp and Arsenal, and the final losing 1-0 to injury time. So for me, it was really exciting because it's super stressful, and then you can look back on it and think of all the stuff we won. But at the time, it was every game I thought we were going to get knocked out. Like even the semi-final against Juventus, because
Juventus.
Juventus at the time were one of the best teams in the world. They were just, I think that a couple of years earlier they'd beaten us 1-0 in both legs and knocked us out. They were just so. One of my friends came around, and when that game was 2-0, he was pretty much like, "Oh, that's game over." And I was just thinking, I felt gutted at the time, thinking that's it, we're going out. But so for me, I would agree with you actually of that season. I do think the first Premier League title as well for me is like an exciting one because you kind of grew up watching unfortunately Liverpool win everything and then Arsenal and Leeds. So basically all the teams I hate are winning everything. And then, then you just think, are we ever going to actually win it? And then when we won it, I had this conversation with my dad at the time saying it'd be good if we could actually, at least be competitive for a few years, just hoping that, we stay in the mix. But obviously we kind of, our dynasty started at that sort of time. But I think it's a good shout though, because at the moment we've got Ronaldo and Messi and we're winding down, and we've kind of got Haaland and Mbappe replacing them. So it seems at the moment. But when you go back to that time of sort of 98, 2002, despite all the talent, it was pretty much 98 was the biggest story was Ronaldo in the final. Like Ronaldo not playing, is he going to play? Is he not going to play? And when France won, most people were still like thinking, oh, they only won because Ronaldo, wasn't there properly. And then 4 years later, it was like you said, like Ronaldo's redemption. For me, like Ronaldo was like kind of the best player in the world, like without a doubt, for at least I don't know 4 or 5 years over that time frame. So I kind of agree with you. I do think I'd probably extend it a little bit and go for some of the like the battles with Newcastle and Arsenal. I think were really good years in terms of as a Manchester United fan. But I think if you throw in world football as a whole, I think 98 and 2002 are possibly two of my favourite World Cups. And I think the 94 was quite good as well in terms of like the games as well. So it's be interesting to know what Amondi's probably got a bit more World Cup sort of football
We're going to
experience,
hear
but
about
maybe he's got a different win.
1952 Uruguay now.
I don't
I've got
remember
so
like
much
the
to say.
70 team.
Rich, I mean, I was just listening to you, man. I think, yeah, you make really good points about the 90s. I think it's got a lot to do, two factors for the 90s for me. It has a lot to do with the Premiership coming in and access to football. We were watching so much more football. And it was a beautiful thing to see. I mean, it ended with the end of the 90s, which 90s was a great decade anyway for most of us, with obviously the era with Beckham, Owen, and the World Cup in 98, the 96 coming home, Euro 96 was fantastic. That sort of brought
How
football
was that,
back.
Amonde?
Where were
Like,
you?
well, I was like 8 or something.
All right, yeah, brilliant.
So
It was
like
absolutely,
compared to the COVID one that we just had where we got
oh,
to the final.
peas all over that. It was outstanding. I mean, it
I
was
thought we were going to
like
win.
England was
I thought we were
different
going
back
to
then.
win it.
Yeah. Just always do.
But
Go and look at images. Go and watch. Remember Badil and Skinner used to do fantastic show, fantasy football. And obviously the numbers were good because it was only a selective amount of channels were covering it. Des Lyman and the team. It was just so special. And even it's like hazy nights. The night we beat Holland, or the Spain game, which the penalty shootout. And Gaza coming to the fore, and that all started. The 90s is a big decade. This is why I'm kind of endorsing you, because it started with 1990 World Cup, where I think needs a mention. Obviously, after that, we had the Graham Taylor era. I'm talking about England, where it was just like hitting the channels and complete mess. Everyone's seen that documentary, which is rest in peace there, Graham Taylor. But the football took a dive. We didn't qualify for 92. We didn't qualify for 94. And then we had the home tournament. Obviously, Terry Venables come and took over and restored that football into our hearts. So it was really good for football, for Premiership. And also one key thing, after the 99 World Cup's really good, but there was a rule change, the pass back rule. I think that's changed a lot, given for the attackers as well. And as you now, we talk about sweeper keeper, that's key at the moment. And you look how the game's changed, because I'm going to go back to the dark ages. The 80s I have to rule out, because I think the 80s with hooliganism, and even though English clubs are doing fantastic in Europe, not many games televised. There was a lot of corruption, people getting robbed abroad with results. Maybe the football was a bit. If you go and watch it now, especially kids today, if you go and watch 1980s games, go and watch a European semi-final, watch Liverpool in 1984, or the high school game, it was boring. It wasn't really that exciting. I've heard people say that's boring football, whatever. But because of the pass back rule, we could sort of, could really get away with so much more and slow it up and that kind of thing. Imagine someone comes near you, you don't under pressure, just pass it back and pick it up and take his time. And imagine what you can do with that. So I think the pass back rules really changed the game. My favourite era, where I think deserves another mention, is from 1958 to 1970, because 58 was the birth of Pele, the Swedish World Cup. It was televised now. You could actually see good footage. And Pele came onto the scene, and he was fantastic. And throughout the 60s, Pele went on tour with Santos, and they were coming all around Europe. And this is when the Champions League started, or the European Cup as well, during the 60s or 50s and 60s. And he had these wonderful players coming over who were being televised and watched. Real Madrid, look what they did through the 60s. Obviously, Man United won their first European Cup. Celtic with a home-based team. It's like me in Ealing, just tip age from Ealing, winning the European Cup. It's fantastic. So I think through the 60s had birth George Best. Look at the prestige he had. He was a celebrity, bigger than what we know now. Imagine if he was around today. He was an idol. People loved him. He was a absolute superstar. Ballon d'Or winners, Dennis Law, Scottish player. You had Bobby Charlton, George Best, Eusebio. You had this what's his name? Who's the guy from Argentina played for Real Madrid?
De Stefano.
Stefano,
Stefano, and Puskas and all these guys. There's famous Italian teams, Inter Milan and AC Milan. So I think they have to get a mention. And if you look at the domestic game in the 60s as well, obviously we won the World Cup with the home tournament. That was just massive. You talk about 96 earlier. So the 60s from 58 to 1970, because I finished with 1970 because it was the 1970 World Cup. That was special. That was really special. You go back now and that's beautiful to watch. The Brazilian team was just outstanding.
Do you know what I've got an issue about that with the 1970 World Cup? I used to have like a little videotape with Felix the Cat, the goalkeeper, and it was the 1970 World Cup. And I always think that World Cup is a bit overrated now. Not for the quality of football, because if you think about Kipita or Carlos Alberto's goal, famously Pele is just walking his dog in the park and just lays a ball off to this manic right back who comes running in and smashes it. But I think that in Mexico it was too hot to play proper football, and that's why it looked so good, because they were the best players in the world with space and time. There's a famous picture of Gordon Banks. The only shade he could find in the Azteca was literally the goalpost.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. But I think you make an interesting point, OMONDI, which is in the two eras that you brought up, which is the beginning of the 90s and the 60s. I think that these were very hopeful areas in and out of football. With we might view it a bit differently now, but New Labour and stuff was apparently one of the most exciting times for Britain ever.
Things will only get better. Now I found
D-Ream.
Yeah.
Do you know who was the keyboardist in D-Ream?
The physicist, isn't it? What's his name?
Brian Cox.
Brian Cox.
Oh, you're joking.
No, he was the keyboardist in D-Ream. The guy
he was in the band.
Planets. Here we got a big black hole. that guy. He was the keyboardist in D-Ream. But I think I can remember bits and pieces of it, but I mean I wasn't going out in Manchester like on the Mandy and stuff. But it looked like an incredibly exciting time, and in the 60s we're just getting out of like post-war depression and things. Like you talk about the European Cup, and to sort of briefly bring up the Super League, one of the reasons that I find it just awful, the idea of the Super League, is that like Manchester United obviously are entwined with the European Cup, but the European Cup was about rebuilding Europe and getting people, like getting the world back together, which is, there are not many things that only sport can do, but that's one of them. And I think that both these areas that you've highlighted with Best, you know, like the Beatles and things, and then the 90s, I don't know, the Spice Girls and Beckham and things. I think they were exciting, positive
Beatles,
times.
Spice Girls.
Well, look, I'm a Spice boy.
I think it was exciting though, like OMONDI says. Because at the start of the 90s, it was like the rebranding of the Premier League, the Champions League sort of launching and rebranding. And I think for football fans, it was quite exciting because obviously we were banned from Europe, stuff that happened, like we mentioned earlier, before I really started watching football. So the fact we got to enter the Champions League and play these teams like Barcelona. I mean, the first time we played them, it didn't work out too well with Haji and Romario and Stoichkov. And you think, wow, look at these teams, and you just didn't get to see that.
It did work out well in '91.
Yeah, 91 was actually one of my favourite tournaments. But the Champions League, where you got to see all these different teams, and I think also European football might have been more competitive in hindsight, where you look at it and there's a different team winning the Champions League most years. You wouldn't get the monopoly that, say, Real Madrid had for sort of 4 or 5 years, and maybe Man City got now. You'd have to go back actually to the very start of the European Cup, where Real Madrid won the first, was it 5 or 6? But they did have two of the best players in the world. But it was almost like it was, I think every team that won it then didn't get to the final, and they just used to be marketing this competition, saying it's so difficult to win, no team retains it, and so we eventually got to the final, won it. Then the next season, we don't do too well. It was just a difficult competition, but also no easy games. Like there is now, you watch the group stage just thinking, okay, just get through the boring games and let's get to the proper knockout games.
True.
And there'd be like only 3 or 4 teams you think can win it. But back then you'd look at it and go, it could be Barcelona's year, it could be United, could be Inter, Juventus, Ajax. There's like 10 teams that could feasibly win, which I think makes it more exciting. Whereas now you watch it this season and just as a United fan, you just hope someone gives City a game, and no one is. Just go, at least don't let buckle in the first 30 minutes. Make it competitive, and just think, okay, fine.
I think.
Yeah.
I was going to say there's more identity in the 80s with these football clubs from nations, for example. So in the 80s, I think Steaua Bucharest won it, Porto won it, PSV with Koeman won it, Aston Villa won it, and Liverpool won it, and then Roma and Juventus. No, sorry, Juventus won it. So there's different teams, but it was a clash of styles: English style of football versus Italian style of football, or a German or a Dutch style of football. And I think that was great, especially imagine Steaua Bucharest and even Red Star Belgrade. We have to talk about the breakdown of Yugoslavia in the 90s. They had a fantastic basketball team and a fantastic football team that could have dominated for years to come, but it was broken up, and it's so unfortunate. As you said earlier, the 98 they got to the 3rd place in the World Cup, but that was Croatia. But imagine them as a unified Yugoslavia with Prosinecki and Dragan Stojkovic, who's one of my favourite players, really underrated player. But yeah, sorry, Rich, I think 80s are massive.
Well, I was going to say, there's like now you look at some of the leagues, and with like Bayern Munich dominating their league or Paris Saint-Germain dominating their league, I think some of the leagues do seem less interesting to like. I don't follow other leagues, but in the past, when maybe before we had a lot of Premier League coverage, we used to watch. Well, I used to watch like Serie A programs on TV because of the great AC Milan team and just the fantastic Dutch players they had. And the league seemed really competitive. That AC Milan, Juventus, Inter Milan, Lazio, they all had a chance of winning. Whereas now, if the same team like Juventus wins it 9 years in a row, I think you lose something in interest, and people just get. It's good that in a way that's kind of inevitable, isn't it? Where someone works out the best way of, like Pep Guardiola builds a super team, but it's not it's a bit to the detriment of the excitement of the league, where you go, okay, right, fine, City are going to win it again, which, but it's good for City fans, I guess, for United fans in the 90s. I think the difference with United is it always felt like we had to fight for the title. It was usually won the last day of the season, more often than not. Whereas
So
I
hang
don't
on
think
a
we ever
second, Rich.
coasted to it.
Monday, your mic is. You've gone Dalek again. On my time. Oh, he's off. Brilliant. Well, you're now on with me and panel regular Rich Sports. I find what you're saying, Rich, really interesting because you. Hang on. I don't know how to work buttons.
Yeah. Hello,
So
my
that
back.
was me.
That was my voice.
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, sorry.
What I was just about to say, Amonde, is that Rich is sort of talking about like how football is almost at sort of late stage capitalism, where all the resources are sort of like congregated in like clubs, and it's all so boring. It's the same teams winning, and this is why I want to go back to 1998 because Rich, you brought up the Juventus team. Do you remember that midfield?
Oh, it's Zidane. You mean like
Zidane,
the
David,
19
Deschamps, and Conte.
like
And
Inzaghi
Edgar
up front?
Davids.
Yeah, it's Davids. Yeah.
Oh, did you? Sorry, I didn't hear. But you think? I mean, for those people who don't know, Edgar Davids was like the first kind of fully customized footballer that you would see on FIFA. He had like dreads, these yellow glaucoma glasses. He was a little pit bull. He was a nasty little street footballer that had a beautiful left foot. Did all these skills that you'd never seen in your life before, and that was a Juventus team that were competing a lot, but. They were going up against that great Ajax team of 1997, I think, which had
95.
Seedorf, Kluivert, the De Boer twins.
Yeah, Ronald Frank de Boer.
Danny Blind.
Van der Sar was there, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Was
Van
he
der
there then?
Sar.
Yeah.
Finidi George.
The
Littman.
Nigerian winger.
Yeah, Littman.
Was Lippmann there as well, wasn't he?
Yeah. This is 95. They beat AC Milan, and the following year they got to the final again. They went unbeaten through the whole Champions League and the league. I think they were unbeaten. Talk about invincibles, but that team, it was amazing. Rijkaard came back from Italian football and just was that key man with the experience, and really made Frank, who's the man, Van Gaal, who ended up at Man United years later. That really made him that team. Fantastic.
That's the only team that can really stand, I think, with the '99 team in terms of sort of like homegrown players of the recent era. I mean, maybe these Bucharest teams and stuff like that you talk of, I don't know, but I think back on all the players that were around there. Like there used to be this fat little guy called Riquelme, who. Yeah, I think he played for Villarreal, I think.
Yeah, he was signed by Barca and he ended up at Villarreal, yeah.
Yeah, and he's just the quintessential South American, lazy drinker, but what a left foot. And he could do things you couldn't believe. Was he right-footed?
Yeah, he was right-footed. He wasn't fat. I don't think he's
well, you know what I mean.
I know you mean. No, he was just his style of play made him look.
Yeah, just outrageous. Even when you think about the Premier League, you had David Ginola at Tottenham and Newcastle, who Ginola famously
Aston Villa, weirdly,
and at Aston Villa with who was that guy, Gregory something, the manager who dropped him.
Ex-player John Gregory.
John Gregory, yeah. And it's I look at the league now, right? in all the leagues. And I must say, yeah, we all don't like Haaland, robotic Viking, etc., etc. Him and Grealish, to be fair to them, have personality and they play with personality, and it's very rare in the league. Like, we've got Martinez, Casemiro, and Bruno, who I think play with a bit of personality, and the rest kind of don't. I suppose Anthony to a degree, but the rest kind of don't feel like it. And I just think that there used to be footballers that expressed like a kind of idea, I mean, someone like Luis Suarez is a so and so, but when he's handballing off the line in World Cup finals and celebrating and things, he's sort of that's expressing something. Like Robbie Fowler sniffing the line after,
It was fun. That was funny.
Yeah, like Rooney, when was it Phil Bardsley who knocked Rooney out, and then he did that celebration. Like it feels to me, and I don't want to make this about the old days, because nostalgia is just another form of loneliness. But we're not lonely because we're all together. But it feels like to me that football has moved on from this incredibly exciting and hopeful time where there were people like Zidane doing stuff that you had never seen. JJ Okocha did a trick that I still do to this day, where he sort of like he rolls it, steps over, gets it onto his other side. Like,
you do that?
Yes, I do that all the time.
Wow.
Because I've got a big ass.
I mean, no matter even if you know it's coming, you still can't stop it.
No, like it's really useful for getting free kicks. By the way, if you've got your back to goal, you can roll it one side, get your hips and your ass in the way, take the contact, go down like a dying swan, or if it's advantageous, you can then pass it. And if it's on your bad side and you just want to look like a bit of a dickhead, do a Rabona. Very, very happy. But it's like Ronaldinho. He wasn't even a footballer. He was like an alchemist or a magician. He used to do stuff like, do you remember that crossbar thing he did? Where there was an advert for Nike boots where he hit the crossbar, chested it up, hit the crossbar again. You didn't know if it was real or not.
Yeah, I don't think it was real, but
no,
you don't know, do you? Yeah,
but it could have been because it was him, and he brought such magic. And now, where is the magic gone, boys?
But hold
on,
but I think that's to do with marketing. I mean, these were big stars at the time. One thing I would say, individually, they were fantastic, and I don't see them sort of players anymore. I think they whether it's the character, like you talk about the characters missing in the game. The name that you mentioned, Rui Costa earlier, he had a flair about him. Rivaldo had some bent legs, and he walk around and had his own individual style. No one could play like him, to this day. So there was. I think the '90s had some really great players who are unique. And it's just like now, maybe you were talking about before bath time about the way people are trained. They're all uniform to be the same in a way.
Not fit into a system.
Media training as well. Yeah.
Donny van der Beeks, bruv. There's just too. There's too many.
They just got to do a certain role, and if they deviate beyond, they don't deviate beyond what they're supposed to, like what they're programmed to do they? Like Ronaldinho, no one knew what he was going to do. I don't think Ronaldinho knew what he was going to do. You remember that goal against Chelsea where I think he scored a goal, and I didn't even realize he'd taken a shot. I was just like, how has that gone in? And I watched the replay and go, I still don't get it. It's just
my favourite one is where he should have headed the ball, but instead he took it on his chest, flicked it up, and overhead kicked it into the top corner. And it was outrageous. And he did an interview in Spanish afterwards where he said, I've been trying to score that goal all my life. And I'm like, I bet you bloody have. That is an outrageous thing to try, even like in a kickabout on the park. It was just, it was great. And
can I ask something then?
Yes.
Like, we talk about the styles, we talk about these wonderful players. And sometimes, like you said, Riquelme, even Maradona in 1990, for example, he had a team around him that played for him. Riquelme, this old school Italian number 10, you play through the number 10, Baggio, Del Piero, Totti's, all these sort of guys. Do you think these flair players have come out of the game because it's become more uniform now and we're lacking those sort of players? Because I can recall, like, it's always like a number 10. Every team, Michael Laudrup, Hadji, Rivaldo, Platini. Number 10s was like a special player, and it seems now we're bypassing that position. That's just an empty hole, a void, and we're lacking sort of that sort of going to a game, seeing some sort of skill, like he's talking about the Ronaldinho skill or Riquelme. Villarreal was successful because Riquelme played for Riquelme, they played through Riquelme, and they beat Arsenal, they beat Everton, who just qualified for Champions League, got all the way to the semi-final maybe, or final, no, semi-final Champions League, and that's success, you know. Pablo Amar for Valencia under
Ariel Ortega, those kind of players.
So these players were given license to have that free will to do what they wanted to do, and it was more entertaining, in my opinion.
For me, it made the teams more interesting. Because you have the teams have different styles. Then it's not like, oh, look what Man City are doing. Right, let's get 5 teams trying to do the same sort of thing. It's like, no, we've got different players. Like you said, you play to the strength of your best players. And maybe that's why the teams have different identities, and it is more exciting because you think, oh, we're going to play against. Because when we're talking about the '90s as well, like Rebrov and Shevchenko, Dynamo Kiev, that was one of the best strike partnerships. One of my friends, a massive fan of them, and we only got to see like a less quality version though, a few years down the line. He did really well at AC Milan, but I think by the time Chelsea got him, he wasn't the same player. But
same with Rebrov at Spurs.
Contenders. Yeah, Rebrov at Spurs. My university friend, a Spurs fan, hoping that they'd get Shevchenko. They got Rebrov. This wasn't.
They used to get a lot of strikers though. Spurs, like they've had good strikers over the years. Like you think Kane, Keane, Chris Armstrong, Defoe, Les Ferdinand, Sheringham. Yeah, like they've always had good strikers. Spurs.
That's true. Going back to Spurs, sorry, like Glenn Hoddle, I think he doesn't get mentioned. He's always on TV these days, but when you're watching these old guys in the studio, a lot of young people don't realise what a great player he was as well. I mean, playing in the English league, I think he was just outstanding. People just think, how can you not get the most out of Glenn Hoddle for England a lot of the time? It's only when we went to Monaco and under Arsene Wenger, he started playing some outstanding football.
Have you heard the Ferdinand story about Glenn Hoddle?
Yeah, when Glenn Hoddle was going to pick him to be like the sweeper, to bring the ball out.
Well, a different story is that Ferdinand said on one of his podcasts that got called up to England, really excited. The family are so pleased. Everyone's talking to him. They're all going, Rio, like, you know, who's the best player? And he went, the manager. He's doing stuff I've never seen before. Like Hoddle famously did a routine, I think at Southampton or something, and no one could do it except for him. It was like, and he was such a great player. But this comes back to the point: is that where are all these players going? And I think it comes down to a couple of things. The first thing is the facilities are too nice nowadays. Like when we all played football, like we all played out on the streets until like it was time to come home. There weren't like roving gangs of knifed up pedos and things or whatever happens these days. like we used to play a lot, flat balls and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, I played in the countryside, and I remember that this is true, I used to practice my crossing by hitting a plough.
This is like a Rocky IV story, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh,
well, do you know what? I found out that one of my favourite players when I was younger was Alessandro Del Piero. You know, I was that little kid that took a picture of him into the barbers and said, "Make me look like this." I know. But he used to practice his free kicks by turning a light switch off with his tennis ball. And after a couple of broken windows, I had to stop doing that. But I used to practice that. But I think it's certainly in Latin America. There's small concrete pitches, and it's like the cages that you get around parts of London and things. You know, the sort of basketball nets and all that. And it's where you kind of get those street players from, like Rooney with the elbows. You then got the awful academy system, and I wasn't good enough to get in an academy. I know half our chat appears to have been in academies, but you know, I had to go to crappy non-league clubs and do my stuff there. Like, were you in academy, OMONDI?
No, but my manager was a guy called Ted Dell for the school. We had like almost with Paul Yates, Paul Hughes, we're all at Chelsea. And if I ever had a chance to get to a proper club like that, I should have really turned it up. But by this point, I'm messing around. So our school teacher was Ted Dell. He was still, up until a few years ago, was the youth team coach at Chelsea. So he brought up Dewberry and all these guys, a guy called Marvin as well. So I was in and around these guys, but I wasn't good enough for them. And I should have, when I was about 11 years old, I should have signed for a team called Belmont, who were, they asked me to go and play for them, who were top team of our area in Harrow. And I said no, because I wanted to stay with my friends. But really, I always look back and think, wow, if I would have gone and played for Belmont, they beat us 10-0, for example, in a cup final. That's how good they were. And most of their players went on to go to clubs, and some went pro. So, yeah, I was sort of, not to boast, but I think I was on the cusp of it. But I just didn't have the motivation. My mum and dad got divorced, and my dad wasn't around anymore to back me or to push me. I lost.
It's on top of the pops.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there you go. But,
So were Belmont like Senrab?
Sorry?
Were Belmont like Senrab? Like Senrab is the sort of like the team where everyone comes from now.
Yeah, they were that Senrab of our area. They're really good, really good. So I mean, Stanley Bowles, not Stanley Bowles. So, I can name the players, George Cole, all these great little players. It's like a clique of them, and they were just fantastic. And a lot of them went to clubs, and I think they were just out. Come against them, they were legends of the time. You know, really scared to come up against them because they were so good.
Yeah, only one of my mates made it to be a professional footballer from the old days, and I'm not going to say his name because he's in a relatively high profile position. But when he's not, we'll see if we can get him on. And it will be very interesting if we can get him on. But like, so Rich, like, I don't think you make any claims to have got close to playing for Belmont or
no, I don't make the claims that we have often heard and read and queried whether they're how close to reality they actually are. No, I just played for fun in different clubs. But I think the facilities, you look at just thinking of like playing basically where I grew up as well. You play on nearly frozen pitches that are freezing cold, and you just try and defrost your hands in the car to take your football boots off. It's not the facilities that we look at now in terms of football pitches, but do you think players it's like too easy for players?
Yes.
Is that the point? Do you think also that there's a different motivation? I think of a lot of people growing up watching football in the 90s, it was about sort of success, entertainment, sort of glamour, whereas now it seems heavily financial in terms of you make it, you get you set up for life, you sign your first professional contract, you make it at a Premier League team, you got all the money. And I remember like reading, I think it was Roy Keane's book where he was at Forest and he looked around, just said there's just people there that for them it's a job. You turn up, you win, you lose, it doesn't matter, you go home. Whereas Roy Keane was like, well, I'm a bit disappointed we're not winning everything. And you kind of have that some players with that motivation. And I'm wondering now whether, do you remember Bentley, the player that was supposed to be the new David Beckham?
David Bentley, yeah.
Where he basically just said that for him, he wasn't enjoying it and said, I'm not enjoying it. And I think mentally for him, he made the right decision. He just got out. And people were like, oh, why is he getting out? Why is he? And if your heart's not in it and you've got other things to do, I can see why for some people it is just a sort of opportunity to get a huge amount of money early on. And if you've got the ability, it seems like it's a bit of a no-brainer to not to try and at least set yourself up financially for life, possibly by having a couple of good years. I mean, there's a lot of other jobs you could do for much longer to get the same situation. So I'm just wondering whether the motivation's not there for some people. Like for some, it clearly is, and you can tell, can't you? The players that are genuinely disappointed or frustrated with losing, and we get disappointed as fans, don't we? Watching some players that clearly don't care. They've lost the game. They're just like high-fiving their friends. You just lost. Like,
another point I'm just going to throw in there. I think with the influx of like foreign players, we've lost our identity. So there's less sort of a connection for some fans with the club. If you go back to this 90s, the era that you were talking about, this is an endorsement of your era, because you did say at the start of the show this is the best era of football. I think even back then, Italian clubs, before that was a quota. You could only have 2 or 3 foreign players. I remember.
Yeah.
So like Ian Rush went to Juventus, and Laudrup left, or Platini went there, and someone else left. What was his name? Bosniak. What's his name? Polish striker.
The Bosnich thing.
Not Bosniak.
Bosnian. It's that free transfer thing, isn't it? The Belgian striker.
So really,
Mark Bosman.
Not Mark Bosman.
Yes, it was.
I'm talking about a Polish striker. Bosniak. He was brilliant. Forget his name now. Anyway.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the free transfer man.
No. So I think that even then, you talk about United, there was an affiliation. You had Irish, Scottish players. Look how many great Scottish players there were in the 80s coming through. Fans, even though it wasn't televised, like look at Liverpool side, they're full of Scottish players. Hanson, Keegan, Tunis, and going throughout the whole side, Welsh players, Irish players. That made up the core of the British team, so the fans had more of an affiliation with the team. Now it's got a bit diluted because getting all these foreign players coming over, even in youth teams, they're bringing best foreign young players over early. Look at Chelsea, for example. And so you don't have the identity with the players. And I think with the fans, this is. And I think if you go back to the 80s, the Italian football was dominant because it was mainly Italian players playing. And you get the best out.
I don't know about that. Like, there was a huge Dutch contingent and things. I understand the point you're making.
3, like Hullet, Van Basten, and Rijkaard, but the only 3 allowed to come, like Mateus, Bremer, and another German player went to Inter Milan.
Is it Voller?
33. Was it Voller? Maybe.
Was it Rudy Voller?
Yeah, he was. You're right. It was Voller. Yeah, Voller.
I think the thing about stuff like that is that, so like with culture is acquired learning. So there's like, over here we do things like Guy Fawkes and stuff like that. No one knows why we're burning like Catholics at the stake and things, and it's a bit crazy, but it's part of the fabric that weaves us all together. And I agree with you that like I think that Manchester United should always be catered to the people of Manchester and the match-going fans above all. But even with our listeners, there will be people who will never go to Old Trafford, who haven't had an opportunity, and they resonate with the club and the ideas and the values. And I think that a lot of the time we'll get a player like Martinez who'll come in and he gets it because he understands that Manchester is a socialist city built on working for your teammates, on courage, on being aggressive and adventurous, and all these kind of things. So I think that there are values that are sort of universal that are summed up by football clubs. And to get to Rich's point about where he talks about motivation and things, the first thing that came to my mind is Jimmy Hill, where Jimmy Hill campaigned to get max wage or to stop minimum wage cap for footballers. And you think of Andy Gorham, personal hero of mine, Lineker, the Nevilles. They all had the choice of football or cricket. And they all went for football because essentially for money. And for me, whilst talent might be a problem, motivation has never been one for me. Like, I think most people know about how I take a lot of things to the extreme in terms of football. But I think what it is... Oh, and also the other thing I wanted to bring up was Ben White. Ben White, the hero of cryptocurrency, is someone who doesn't like watching football, doesn't really like football. He's said it several times. There was a Japanese lad at Bolton who also said he didn't like football. Was it not Nakata, but it was something like that. From the Grey Allardyce team. Do you remember who I'm talking about, Amonde?
Inamoto? Not Inamoto?
I think he was an Arsenal player. I'm not sure, but there was a Japanese guy who played for Celtic and like Kirawaka.
Oh, Nakamura.
Nakamura or something?
Yes,
I know you
yes,
mean, though. He did
Nakamura.
very well at Celtic,
Nakamura, yeah. He hated football as well. He didn't hate football, but he had no interest in it. And we read
some
about
people enjoy playing it,
Casemiro.
though, don't they? A lot of people I know. I think some people commented on that was on social media recently. That Ben White story, and some people were commenting saying, "Yeah, I love playing it, but it's boring to watch," or they don't like watching a lot of games. And I guess for some people, playing
Couldn't
sport
agree
is pretty
more.
different to watching it.
I'd much prefer to play football than watch it, like for 90% of the time. Like
When
if
you
you
start with
offer-
cricket, actually, I was thinking I enjoyed playing cricket, particularly if you're batting or bowling or in the action. But if you're watching it. I used to sometimes watch Test cricket, but now is that unless it's some school holidays and you're that age and you've got a lot of free time, you can't watch it. But it's one of those things as well that there's a lot of sports that I'd much rather play than watch. If you're able to, it's just more fun, isn't it? So I can understand why they're saying that. I don't see a big problem with it if
Same with
they're
sex, innit?
professional.
I'd much rather participate in it than watch it. Shout out to Ben
I hope
White and his
somebody
missus.
manages to watch the podcast to this point and has some comments on that. That'd be interesting.
Actually, yeah, because we're coming to the end of the podcast. We got we're just recording this before the Brighton match this evening. So good luck, United. But we'll talk to Solo and we'll try and get it so that we can look at the comments and things. And if you do like this, let us know, because I mean, I like it, and I assume that Amonde and Rich like it.
Of course.
It's very
Can
I know
rare.
it's not what I
can
like to do on a lot of my channel. Like you start off with a theme, talk about
Yeah.
whatever's of interest. Everybody's interested. Well, everybody that gets involved with our channels is interested in football. Otherwise, they're wasting their time, aren't they? I don't know quite what else they're going to talk
But
about. So
can
no,
I just say, so we said there's a window of time from '98 to 2002, which was the best era of football for you. But so if you're talking best era of football, let's talk about Ronaldo, for example. So to this day, people still say he's the real Ronaldo. And I was reading some comments on some forum the other day. Said, how do they, who wasn't around when he was playing at his best, how can he be the real Ronaldo based on what Cristiano Ronaldo has done? So has football evolved? Are these players surpassing these great players that we talked
No.
about? Rivaldo, Rui Costa, Zidane, Ronaldo, Romario is one of my favourites, but Batistuta. Have these players today, because I don't think they have surpassed these players for talent.
Not
I
for
don't think
us.
that's all. We got
I
Haaland,
think
for example, in the Premiership, and then we're talking about Ronaldo. People say, well, Ronaldo's didn't win a Champions League, or he didn't score 50 goals in a season or something. So yeah, just throwing it out there.
I think right.
These guys are better.
So I'll tell you what my view is on Ronaldo, on Luis, whatever he's called, R9. The real Ronaldo is that without doubt, my favourite player. Messi and Ronaldo don't get near R9 for me. And the reason is that I remember being a very young child watching Football Focus, and I had something. I had some drink that they used to drink in the Congo, Mbongo. I had an Mbongo.
Way down deep in the middle of the jungle, a hippo took a guava and a mango. They stuck it with the others and they
Rewind. Yeah,
I know. Let's call it Umbongo.
that's it. Right, so Mbongo was basically just orange sugar, and Football Focus was on 11 o'clock or something, and I was bouncing off the walls with my Mbongo, and they showed Bobby Robson in Barcelona, and I'll never forget it. And he was talking about Ronaldo. Never heard of this guy, and they showed his goals, and football changed forever for me. It was like watching. John Olomu was a rugby player.
yeah, I was going to say that's the parallel, isn't
rugby.
it? Someone that is so big, so powerful, quick that you look at him and think there's no fault. And I think with Messi and Ronaldo, they've been in great teams. But I think with R9, he just destroys you on his own. I think some of his goals where he just runs not through defenders, but he's stronger than defenders. He overpowers them and he outskills them. There's no chance for some of these players. And I think it's a shame he got injuries, but I think despite that, we still saw a player that was head and shoulders above anybody he was playing against. And that's why I think that the eras you picked are pretty much like Ronaldo not doing what we thought he was going to do. We thought he was going to beat France, win the '98 World Cup, and eventually came back and put in a great World Cup in 2002 with another great Brazil
Questionable
team.
hairstyle.
Questionable hairstyle, definitely. Questionable hairstyle, but phenomenal performance. And no, probably the best sort of rival player of that era. Whichever
Who's got
for,
standing ovations at Old Trafford from from the opponents?
He's in a group of one, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Roman Abramovich was at that game, and that's when he decided that he wanted a football club. Was watching what Ronaldo did. I mean, he just Ronaldo played football the way you would in your dreams. In your
Yeah.
wildest dreams, you score goals like that. And he was doing that with skills that you didn't even know existed. And Ronaldo and Messi are wonderful players. Like, Messi is up with the greatest players ever, and Ronaldo is like equally not that far behind. But Ronaldo was something completely different. He was literally, it was like poetry. It was like going from watching EastEnders or Hollyoaks to Shakespeare turning up with like samba music and like this love of life and dancing. It was outrageous. Like, I mean, it's crazy to think that my first love was Ronaldo. I couldn't, just everything he did was just magical. And
Sorry, going back to the marketing, that advert, what do they call it?
Mash que nada.
Yeah, that series of adverts really captured us as well. I mean, to see the skills, see the personality, like you're saying at the start, and the way even like he was faulty because he had bad teeth, for example. But that made him even more beautiful. A bit like Ronaldinho came along with something like that. Like I say, in the bow legs of Rivaldo, they had something quirky about him. But his smile was infectious. The way he played football was just magical. He had more sort of take-ons of a goalkeeper scoring goals than anyone else. I can't recall anyone who's got a better stat than that, but actually one-on-one the keeper and dribbling
those
around.
step overs.
Yeah, that goal he scored in the UEFA Cup final against Lazio, for example. It's like the highlight before he got injured. And let's just keep it real. From 98 to 2002, that's 4 years. The first 2 years, so 97 is at Barcelona, had that fantastic season. 98 signed for Inter Milan. Then he had the issue with the World Cup final. We still don't know to this day what went on there. But as Rich was saying, that was all built up because the year before that, Brazil went on tour rather than because they were the winners in 94. They didn't have to qualify for the World Cup. So they went on tour all season, playing other nations, going around the world on tour, building up their profile. And Ronaldo. And there's Ronaldo and Romario up front. Bebeto had to take a back seat. And they were just absolutely. If anyone, please go and check out 97 season. Ronaldo and Romario up front for Brazil with Denilson and all these other guys behind them. That was outstanding. Best partnership I've ever seen. They were just on the same page. And then to get injured at Inter Milan, and you think his career's over with, and to come back within 4 years and win the World Cup, scoring a brace in the final, that's what dreams are made of.
It was magic.
I do think, I do like Pele. Pele's my favourite player of all time, but Ronaldo is special. And this is what it touches a lot of people from our generation to our hearts. This is why we will not have it and say, oh, even though Cristiano Ronaldo's got more goals or Messi's got more goals, we will not say that these guys are better because they're special to us. And that era was special because it was magical bath time. I'm so glad you've brought up this because it's made me nostalgic, thinking about
much better than the Super League, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know what, though, OMONDI, the last sort of 5-10 years, maybe everybody's comparing Messi and Ronaldo, like Cristiano. When R9 was the best player, there was literally no. I can't remember any player being compared with him ever. I can't remember any single conversation where someone said, "Is Shevchenko better than Ronaldo?" It was not even a credible.
Yeah.
There was nothing, was there? It was like Maradona earlier in sort of the '86 World Cup sort of thing. You have one player stands alone, and I think that's why he's so great. There was no one that could touch him at that time for quite a few years. So yeah, I think if people disagree, then they just need to go back and watch. The footage is there if you want to go and see it. He was just ridiculously good.
Well, gents, I think that we've come to the end. We've done just over an hour. I've only sworn once, so that's pretty good.
Pretty good.
Any closing statements, Rich? Like, do you want to plug your channel or anything like that?
Well, hopefully people watching are aware of my channel, but if not, then come and join in the conversation. We generally start talking about recent games, but quite often we will deviate to this sort of content as well, talking about previous players. Because quite often everybody has this recency bias, don't they? And they'll just say, "Oh, we need to get this person. There's never been a midfielder like him." You go, "Well, yeah, we had Scholes, we had all these other players." So it's good to get involved and have a conversation like this as well, because I think you also picked my favorite year, like '99, the treble winning season is my favorite year because of all the games, and also because even though there was lots of football accessible based on I think it was just us and Arsenal in the Champions League, and because Arsenal just got knocked out quite early, it was pretty much just us. So it was quite nice that we had a monopoly on all the games and all the footage and the sort of marketing. So no, but thanks again for having me on as well. Appreciate you guys. It's been a fun podcast as well. I'll say it's good to speak to you guys about these sort of things.
It's always a pleasure to have you here, Rich. And Amonde, do you have any sort of
Yeah,
inspiring
just,
words?
make sure, guys, you go and check out Rich Sports. He's one of the brothers. Rich Sports, there it is, after 10 o'clock at night. Real beautiful shows he puts together and lovely conversations like the one we're having now. I want to know from people, please, in the comments when you finish, because I don't want to say like I'm giving my opinion, but I want to know what other people think about the era. What era is your favorite era and why? And I think I didn't know about. I mentioned 58. I wasn't born in 58. I wasn't around. I wasn't, but I still know about that era because I've gone and researched. Back in the day, we used to get books or Shoot magazine or all these things, and you used to research and find out who's who, and you hear legends and you go and investigate.
I think you had to put more effort in, didn't you?
Yeah,
you had to find out more. Well, I was going to say, Mondi, you made a great argument earlier on, or not argument, you made a great point about Manchester United in the 60s. They had 3 Ballon d'Or winners in the same team. Has that ever happened since? That you have 3 individual players in one team that was the best player in the world in a short space of time?
Good question.
It's crazy.
I don't know.
Ronaldo, Zidane. Did they all play together at Real Madrid?
Who?
Kaká, Ronaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo, Zidane.
They did. Did they win it at that club though?
No, they didn't.
That's a good question. I don't know.
Maybe would have won it with AC Milan, wouldn't he? So they basically poached Ballon d'Or winners and built a team up. Similar, but I think Manchester United did it properly.
We did
it in the right way.
the better way.
Yeah, just to throw it out there, guys, in the comments after the show, let us know who your favourite player is and why. And can these players that we talk about, it's not so long ago, 30 years, like Ronaldo's, the Rivaldos, do you think they're better than what we got today with the Neymars and the Mbappes and Haalands? What's your thoughts, guys? I really want to know because we're from a different generation. Hopefully we get some older people on and let us know about players from the past that we should know. But it's one thing, everyone, do your research. There's so much, honestly, there's so much videos of, I sometimes watch Ajax in 70, 71, 72, or Bayern Munich.
Like George Best stuff, there's so much.
United. So much great football out there. So many great teams from the past.
All right, boys. I'm gonna bring it to an end here because we could go on all night. So
we could do like another hour, but I think that's
let's go.
Just to summarise, like we'll try and read the comments. We'll talk to Solo. We'll get it sorted out. We hope you're enjoying this. I know it's different content, but we'll read your comments. We'll respond to them, and we'll try and get you on. And most of all, I'd like to thank you for choosing to spend an hour or so. With all of us, but you did get to hear about Amonde's dad, which I thought was a fire story. So it's good night from me.
Good night from me.
Good night from me.